I didn't come to that hearing expecting fireworks. Just another routine session. Another day of carefully worded sound bites, political tightrope walking, and posturing for cameras. The room was packed, the press practically shoulder to shoulder, because Senator Tim Scott had just introduced a sweeping bill that, on paper, promised economic revitalization through community enterprise. But something about it didn't sit right with me. I'd been up since dawn combing through buried pages in the proposal. And what I found wasn't about revitalization, it was about redirection. Redirection of funds, authority, and decision-making, straight into the hands of unelected private boards with little to no public oversight. These community enterprise councils looked innocent. Harmless even. But behind them, a web of quietly formed LLCs. One of which, I discovered, was directly linked to a PAC chaired by someone very close to Tim Scott. So when it was my turn to speak, I didn't just question the bill. I opened the manila folder I'd walked in with, calmly set it down, and said, before we continue pretending this is about community, I'd like to enter into the record a set of corporate documents tied to the same groups this bill empowers, and their financial connections to your campaign. Silence. Tim Scott's eyes flicked up from his notes. I wasn't finished. For a moment, no one said a word. You could hear the buzz of the overhead lights and the soft shuffle of reporters adjusting their phones. Senator Scott's expression didn't change, yet, but his fingers tightened just slightly on the edge of the desk. I continued. These so-called community enterprise councils aren't about empowering neighborhoods. They're about funneling public money into private control. Control by people with names like Cordell Winters and Isla Nash, both of whom happen to be on the board of a shell organization that donated nearly $900,000 to your policy PAC last year. That was when the aides started whispering. Across the aisle, a few Republican staffers straightened in their seats, glancing toward their bosses, unsure whether to intervene or let it play out. Senator Blackburn looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. One of the cameras zoomed in on Tim's face, which was now unreadable but clearly rattled. He finally leaned forward. Ms. Crockett, I suggest you tread lightly. You're tossing around names and accusations without context or verification. I cut in, firm but even, everything I'm stating is backed by publicly available documents. You're welcome to verify them yourself, unless, of course, you already know what they say. Gasps. Someone on the press row actually dropped a pen. And then, as if on cue, a clerk brought forward a binder, the one I had submitted in advance. It bore the seal of the Oversight Committee and over a dozen tabs, each marking a transaction, a signature, a conflict. Page 72, I said without looking. Start there. He hesitated. And the room held its breath. Tim Scott didn't move at first. He just sat there, hand hovering above the binder like it might bite him. Then, slowly, he flipped it open and turned to page 72. His jaw tightened. It was all there, an internal memo from one of the community councils, proposing a redevelopment project that would require eminent domain in a historically black neighborhood, right after the LLC behind it had purchased adjacent land at a fraction of market price. The council's chair. Isla Nash. Same name I'd already dropped. You want to talk about revitalization? I said. Let's talk about land grabs. Let's talk about board members positioning themselves to profit before the legislation even sees a vote. The room was now dead silent except for the frantic clicking of reporters' keyboards. Scott tried to keep his cool. These are isolated incidents. They have nothing to do with me directly, except for the fact, I interrupted, that one of your former staffers is listed as a consultant on the project proposal. And the email on file for coordination? Your Senate address. That landed. Even the Republican senators couldn't hide their discomfort now. One of them, Senator Young, glanced sideways at Scott with a quiet shake of his head. Senator Warren smirked. The room had shifted. No longer watching a debate, they were watching a reckoning. Scott turned to the chairman, clearly trying to regain control. Mr. Chairman, I move that we postpone this hearing until the materials presented can be reviewed for validity, but I leaned in. No need. I've already verified them. And so has the Congressional Ethics Office. That broke the room. A collective rustle of shock, like wind hitting dry leaves. Eyes widened. Phones came out. Cameras zoomed. And Tim Scott. He finally blinked. Tim Scott's composure cracked, just slightly, but enough. His gaze darted toward his chief of staff, who was already typing furiously on a phone. His voice, when he finally spoke, was lower, clipped. Congresswoman Crockett, this is a coordinated smear. You've taken administrative filings and twisted them into baseless conspiracy. I stood up. What I've taken, I said clearly, turning to face the cameras now, is the truth that was hidden in plain sight. And I've laid it bare so the American people can see exactly what's being done with their tax dollars, behind polished speeches and catchy bill titles. Then I walked over to the easel I had rolled in earlier, covered by a black cloth. I pulled it off. Beneath was a blown-up flowchart, names, LLCs, arrows connecting campaign donations to development contracts, and finally, to the legislative language in Scott's bill. At the very center, Tim Scott, circled in red. The visual was damning. Gasps rippled again, this time louder. One reporter whispered, "Oh my God." Scott stood now too, trying to reassert himself. This isn't how congressional debate is supposed to go. You're right, I said. Debate should be about ideas, not backdoor deals. But when you propose legislation built to benefit your donors under the disguise of helping communities, you don't get to hide behind decorum. The chairman, clearly shaken, tapped his gavel. Order. Order, Miss Crockett, please, no. The people deserve order. What they've been getting is orchestrated chaos in the form of corruption. The silence was heavy. The type that meant this wasn't just a headline anymore, it was history in the making. Scott sank back into his chair. And for the first time that morning, he had nothing to say. The rest of the hearing descended into quiet chaos. Senator Padilla called for a short recess. Members from both parties whispered furiously among themselves. Tim Scott's team rushed out of the chamber, binder in hand, avoiding reporters like smoke. The chairman stared at the chart behind me for a long while, then rubbed his temples like he suddenly understood the magnitude of what had just unfolded. I remained seated. Not triumphant, just resolute. Because this wasn't a game. I'd spent weeks quietly gathering documents, cross-referencing filings, and calling whistleblowers who were too afraid to speak unless I promised them anonymity. The truth wasn't just that Scott's bill was corrupt, it was how easily no one had noticed. Or worse, how many had chosen not to notice. A young reporter with glasses and a trembling hand approached me as the cameras cut. Congresswoman Crockett, is it true the ethics office already opened an investigation? I nodded. They didn't just open one, I said. They expedited it after seeing preliminary evidence. There are subpoenas pending as we speak. The reporter's mouth dropped slightly. He stepped away, already dialing. Down the hall, I caught a glimpse of Scott in a side room, head lowered, hands gesturing in rapid panic to his aides. He looked like a man realizing the walls weren't closing in, they'd already closed. I turned to leave the chamber, but not before pausing at the door. Let the record show, I said quietly, mostly to myself, this is what happens when you underestimate transparency. And then I walked out. By the time I reached my office, the story had already broken. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree, text after text, call after call. Headlines rolled in fast. Crockett exposes shocking financial web behind Scott's bill, Tim Scott silent after ethics bombshell, is this the end of the Community Enterprise Act? The clip of me unveiling the flowchart was everywhere, edited, slowed down, reposted with dramatic music. But it wasn't about going viral. It was about the reckoning that was now underway. I received a quiet knock at the door. It was Representative Jaypal. You knew exactly what you were doing, she said, stepping in. It had to be done, I replied. Too many folks count on these bills to bring real help, not funnel cash into fake nonprofits with glossy websites and hidden donors. She nodded. Well, you didn't just throw a wrench in his plan. You set it on fire. Within the hour, 3 moderate Democrats who had originally co-sponsored the bill pulled their support. 2 GOP members issued carefully worded statements calling for a thorough and transparent review of the legislation's funding mechanisms. And then it happened. The Senate Oversight Office issued an official statement confirming that multiple entities connected to the Community Enterprise Act were under investigation for potential campaign finance violations and misuse of federal funds. My staff sat in stunned silence as the news rolled in. I didn't. I knew this was just the beginning. Because one thing I'd learned in Washington, when you pull a single thread tied to power, you'd better be ready for the whole fabric to unravel. Later that evening, as the Capitol began to quiet and the sky outside my window turned that deep DC blue, my office phone rang again, this time on the private line. I answered. A familiar voice came through, tight and composed, but unmistakably Tim Scott. Congresswoman Crockett, he said. I think we need to talk. I didn't respond right away. Just let the silence hold. I'm not calling to argue, he continued. And I'm not calling to admit anything either. But I think things got out of hand today. Fast. The only thing that got out of hand, I said, was the assumption that no one would notice. That no one would challenge you. A pause. Then, you don't know the whole picture. Then show me. He exhaled, long and heavy. For a second, I heard something behind the politician's tone, something that almost sounded like fear. There are others involved. I wasn't supposed to be the one carrying this across the finish line. I was just the face. They picked me because I could sell it. Because I could make it sound like hope. There it was. The real story wasn't just Scott. It was who was pulling his strings. I leaned forward in my chair. Who's they, Senator? Not over this line. Not tonight. Then you're wasting both our time. No, he said quickly. I'm offering you something. Meet me, tomorrow morning. Off the record. Neutral ground. Why would I trust you? Because if you don't, you'll only uncover half the machine. And they'll replace me before the dust settles. That landed. After a long silence, I gave a single nod, knowing he couldn't see it. Text me the location, I said. I'll be there. At 7:15 the next morning, I arrived at the agreed-upon location, a small, old cafe tucked between a law office and a boarded-up bookstore, a few blocks off Capitol Hill. The kind of place lobbyists never bothered with. No press. No interns. Just burnt coffee and dusty blinds. Tim Scott was already there, seated in a corner booth, no security detail, no staffers. Just him, looking like a man who hadn't slept. He didn't offer pleasantries. They came to me 2 years ago, he began, with polling data and a plan. Said America was desperate for community-based solutions, especially in marginalized districts. Said we could create something that looked like equity, while quietly setting up investment structures underneath. Who is they? He slid a folder across the table. Inside, names. Corporate executives. Political consultants. PAC directors. A web of elite stakeholders who'd been quietly acquiring influence across both parties, creating councils, task forces, advisory boards, all funneling public initiatives into privatized cash cows. I didn't start this, he muttered. But once I was in, there was no backing out. I studied him for a long moment. His voice wasn't smug or defensive. It was, resigned. They promised if I pushed the bill, I'd be taken care of. Speaking gigs. Board seats. A legacy. And now. Now I'm the fall guy. He looked up. You can burn me to the ground, Crockett. And maybe you should. But it won't stop them. They'll find another face. A friendlier one. Maybe even someone on your side of the aisle. That stopped me. Because he was right. This wasn't just about one senator. It was a system. And I just kicked its door open. So what do you want from me? I asked. Take this to the Oversight Committee. All of it. But don't stop at me. If you really want to finish what you started, you'll need to go after the architects. I closed the folder. Then I'm going after them all. Back in my office, I spread out the contents of the folder Tim had given me, memos, email chains, donor lists, even private meeting minutes. Every name, every transaction, every lobbying effort was linked to a quiet coalition of power brokers operating under the radar. At the center of it all, an innocuously named group, the Dominion Strategy Collective. Not a government agency. Not even a PAC. Just a consulting network on paper. But in practice, they were writing legislation before Congress even saw it. Installing talking points into campaigns. Shaping policies in exchange for equity stakes in private ventures that benefited from those same policies. The collective had ties everywhere, Democratic consultants, Republican financiers, former Obama-era officials, and post-Trump influencers. No ideology. Just money. I picked up the phone and called Chairman Graves of the Oversight Committee. I have something bigger than Tim Scott, I told him. And it's going to shake this town. I requested a closed-door emergency session. Within 2 hours, we were seated in a secure room with 2 federal investigators and a forensic analyst from the Congressional Budget Office. When I laid out the Dominion files, even the most jaded staffers in the room went pale. How long has this been going on? One of them asked. Long enough, I said. Long enough that if we don't act now, we'll be the next tools in their strategy. That afternoon, subpoenas were quietly drafted. The committee voted unanimously to launch a full-scale investigation, not just into the Community Enterprise Act, but into Dominion Strategy Collective and its influence across multiple bills over the past 6 years. No press release. Not yet. We were moving quietly now, but with purpose. Because the second the architects realized we were coming, they'd try to vanish. But this time, we weren't giving them the chance. Over the next 48 hours, the Capitol turned into a live wire. The Oversight Committee's sealed subpoenas started landing across Washington like quiet thunder. Law firms. Lobby shops. Even a few high-end real estate offices in Georgetown. The Dominion Strategy Collective wasn't just one building, it was a network hidden in plain sight. But someone tipped them off. That same evening, 2 of the LLCs tied to Dominion filed for dissolution in Delaware. A third redirected its website traffic to a dead server. The digital footprints were vanishing fast, but not fast enough. We had already mirrored everything. I received a call from a tech investigator at the CBO. Congresswoman, he said breathlessly, you're going to want to see this. Buried in one of the financial disclosures tied to the collective was a dormant trust. And on its board, a sitting congressman. A name I hadn't expected. Representative Thomas Ellery. A Democrat. One who had spoken passionately about reform and fairness. Who had campaigned on ending dark money. And there he was, listed as a strategic advisor to a fund linked directly to the very program we'd just exposed. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about right or left anymore. This was about power itself, entrenched, unaccountable, and willing to wear any jersey to stay on the field. I slammed the folder shut. I want him called in, I told Chairman Graves. No backroom passes. No soft gloves. If we're doing this, we go all the way. He nodded slowly, grimly. Then we bring the hammer. By nightfall, I had drafted a statement, not for the press, but for the American people. A televised one. Direct. No spin. No filters. Because this wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was a purge. The next morning, at exactly 9 a.m., I stood at the podium in front of a bank of cameras in the House media room. No flags. No teleprompters. Just the seal of Congress and a statement that would rattle every corner of the Capitol. This isn't just about one senator. This isn't just about one bill. This is about the quiet rot that has crept into our system, wearing bipartisan smiles and pushing pre-written agendas designed to look like progress. The room was silent except for the shutters clicking. What we've uncovered is a coordinated effort by a network of operatives, private, political, and corporate, to rewrite policy in exchange for profit. To sell hope while buying silence. To build influence not by earning it, but by purchasing it wholesale. I paused, looking into the camera. This investigation will not be partisan. It will be honest. We are coming for every name, regardless of party, position, or donor list. That line landed like thunder. The feed was live on every major network. News anchors sat in stunned silence. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended within minutes. Hashtag Crockett exposes, hashtag the Dominion files, hashtag Clean House now inside the Capitol. Staffers scrambled. Some were deleting emails. Some were lawyering up. A few, just a few, called our office offering cooperation. An hour after the statement, Representative Thomas Ellery's office released a panicked, poorly written denial. But it was too late. We had his signature on multiple transfers, and a photo of him attending a private Dominion retreat in Aspen. Tim Scott. He had gone dark. Rumors swirled that he'd been advised to resign from committee assignments. Others whispered that he might step down entirely. But I wasn't celebrating. Because what we'd uncovered was only one arm of a machine. And I was ready to take on the whole body. The investigation moved fast, faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, multiple subpoenas were served. Private boardrooms across Washington and Wall Street were now subjects of federal scrutiny. Anonymous tips poured in. Whistleblowers started speaking up, some from deep inside the collective itself. Dominion Strategy Collective was no longer a shadowy rumor. It was now a household name, and a toxic one. Representative Ellery resigned under mounting pressure. 3 others, 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat, quietly recused themselves from key committees. But the real storm came when internal Dominion emails were leaked to the press. Subject lines like, Target, Crockett, Silent Strategy Draft, pull funding from hostile districts, that did it. Public trust snapped. Networks aired back-to-back specials. Protesters flooded congressional town halls, demanding resignations, investigations, and reform. And through it all, I kept showing up. Not because I wanted the spotlight, but because I knew the system counted on people getting tired. Distracted. Moving on. But this time, the country didn't move on. The Oversight Committee's full report, which we released unredacted, detailed over $240 million in redirected funds, a dozen shell corporations, and direct legislative manipulation across 19 federal programs over 6 years. By the end of the quarter, a new bipartisan reform bill had been drafted, one with real teeth, mandatory public disclosure of private legislative consultants, campaign finance firewall laws, and automatic audits for bills connected to outside nonprofits. We called it the Public Protection and Policy Integrity Act. And the first name on it? Crockett. The system didn't collapse. It recalibrated. Because it had to. And as for Tim Scott, he resigned 3 weeks later. No speech. No apology. Just a single line released through his office, the truth came for me. And it will keep coming. Because now, the people are watching.